In this lesson, we'll create the features to mount our battery. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to create a sketch offset, create a mirror feature, and use fillet. Carrying on with the file from the previous example, we want to go ahead and take care of the battery attachment. In order to do this, I'm going to start a sketch on the bottom face of our component tray. Now remember, we are inside of the X-star component. It is currently active. And we're going to start by drawing a rectangle that's going to snap from this point, and we're going to come down and simply sketch without snapping to another point. We're going to drag that point down until it snaps, and notice that it's snapping to various locations on the file. We also want to make sure that this geometry is thick enough that it can handle the loads of zip ties or straps being placed. So we're going to press D to add a dimension, and we're going to give it a dimension of 8 millimeters. Now in our case, our two batteries are not currently touching, and this actually gives us a good representation of using a taller battery as needed. So we're going to use that 8 millimeters, we're going to stop the sketch, and we're going to extrude it up. Now the distance that you need to go up varies. The straps that we're using are going to be 15 millimeters wide and not very tall, so we certainly don't need to go up 20 millimeters. We're going to go up about 10, and we're going to say OK. We're then going to place a fillet on each of these edges of 10 millimeters to fully round that all the way down into the body. We then want to cut through this. So we're going to sketch on the outside face, and we're going to press P to project these edges. We then want to use a sketch offset, and we want to make sure that we come in enough that we're removing material, but we're leaving enough material here that the strap will still have enough meat, and we're not going to break any geometry. So we're going to come in 5 millimeters, and what I want to do is I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to come down an additional 1 millimeter, but I'm going to hold down the control key because there's a lot of things that it wants to snap to. And I'm going to draw over to here, and then I want to snap to this point. So this is going to be vertical, and this line is going to be vertical, but notice that it automatically applied a constraint. We're going to make this one horizontal, and then we want to give this a dimension of 1 millimeter. Now the reason I want to do this is because I want to cut slightly into the base. So we're going to try that 1 millimeter, we're going to see how it works and see if we need to cut any more away. I'm going to extrude this, and I'm going to come through, and I'm going to use the option up to object and go up to this back face. And notice it's trying to cut all the way through. Now that's okay, but we want to make sure that the objects to cut are not actually cutting through the batteries, but only the X-star body. So as we look at this now, let's go ahead and hide the two batteries and see what's been cut. Now if we cut through any more than that 1 millimeter, we'd start to remove material, and some of these mounting points that we created to hold our components would start to break away from the rest of the body. So I think what I actually want to do is I want to modify the sketch, and instead of that 1 millimeter, what I actually want to do is I want to delete that dimension, and I'm going to make this line coincident with that point. Now notice that it gives me an error because it can't actually touch that. So what I can do is I can take this edge and this edge, and I can actually make them collinear, and notice that again it gives me an error here. The reason it's giving me an error is because there's already a line there. So what it wants me to do is it wants me to delete this geometry or simply not use it for my extrude. So if I take a look at the sketch, I now need to create a line that goes from this edge to this edge, and now the extrude is just on the top. So now let's try to mirror features. We're going to mirror this extrude, this internal fillet, and the extrude cut. We're going to select our mirror plane. We're going to leave it optimized, and we're going to say OK. Now when we do that, we're getting an error. Now it says the compute failed and one more of the instances can't happen. So let's try one more time. We're going to select the feature, extrude, fillet, and extrude cut. I'm going to select the mirror plane, and this time we're going to allow it to adjust and say OK. So in this instance, it works because we're not trying to fill it down into this top face, and we're not producing any complex geometry that it can't account for. Now what we need to do is go back and fill it after the fact. So I'm going to take these internal and external edges and I'm going to fillet them now before I blend it into the surrounding geometry. This will make sure that I don't have a sharp corner to catch a zip tie or to catch the Velcro. And then I'll come back, I'll apply a fillet to this internal edge on both sides. We'll blend that in at 2 millimeters. And that geometry will be good enough for what we're trying to do. Now notice there are other ways that we can blend this because now we have a sharp corner here. We could come back and we could fillet this around the outside of the body. But getting into all these small fillets, especially if we try to apply a 1 millimeter radius here, we start to get into issues when we 3D print. We don't really need to have a smooth corner in this area.